There's one secret that can transform any piece of art into $1 million artwork, one skill that all blue chip artists have in common. It requires no talent and anyone can learn it. And the way I discovered the secret all started sitting in a peaceful park, sun is shining, a common nightingale chirping, and I'm completely overwhelmed and stressed out because I'm applying for galleries but had no clue on how to actually do that. After weeks of applying, I get an invitation. Drenched in excitement, I rush to the gallery. The gallery lady goes through my art and she stops at this one particular piece. I'll show you. And then she looks at me and I will never forget the word she said. She said, "Dries, I'm going to be very honest. Your art is just ugly. We can't possibly sell this." It felt like a stab in my gut. I drove home close to tears, full of self-doubt, wondering by myself, what if this is the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? What if I will never get an invitation anymore? What if my art is indeed ugly? What if I'm wasting my time chasing this unrealistic dream? I felt worthless. And then the strangest thing happens. Several years later, the same gallery reached out again. Before I opened the email, I took a deep breath, remembering the past pain, and the email read, "Dries, I'm going to be very honest. Your art is absolutely amazing. We would love to sell it even more." Further in the email, she even praised a particular artwork called Engraved Room Number 9. You guessed it, the same art that they were laughing with several years earlier. And you know what's really baffling about it all? The motto of the gallery, stated in big letters on their website, was, "Art, like wine, gets better with time." What? Art like wine gets better with time? What are you talking about? The art they praised was the same art they laughed with. And so it wasn't the art that aged. It was the perception of the art that aged. And so the follow-up question becomes, what was it that changed their perception? And how can you use that to turn haters into raving fans? And while you're thinking about this, I have prepared something special for you. A perception evaluation checklist that will give you insights in how people perceive your art, so that you can control the perception that people have about your art. I'll give it away for free at the end of the video. For now, let's dive into this concept a little bit deeper. Let me show you with a couple of examples what I believe is one of the most powerful observations artists, gallerists, collectors can make. On the left side you see Spiritus Calidus by John Le Carre, a skull made out of crystals. On the right side you see For the Love of God by Damien Hirst, a skull made out of diamonds. Now John Le Carre was friends with Damien Hirst and accused him of stealing his ID. Let me give you another example. On the left side you see John Le Carre's Yin and Yang, made in 1990. On the right side you see Damien Hirst's Him, made in 1999. Now 1999? Anyway, again, John Le Carre accused Damien Hirst of stealing his ID. Now, I personally believe that both of these IDs are stolen from some kind of science book. It's literally science toys. But anyway, there's this battle going on. Let me give you another example. On the right side, you see the physical impossibility of death in the mind of someone living. A shark in a tank, made in 1991 by Damien Hirst. After he made this artwork, a report came out that it was possibly a stolen ID from Eddie Saunders, who had a shark in a vitrine that he called Shark in a Tank, made in 1989. Now let me give you one more example, the best example that I found. On the left side you see Thomas Downing's spot paintings, and on the right side you see Damien Hirst's spot paintings. So spot the difference and let me know in the comment section. Now, why am I showing you these examples? What does this have to do with the perception of an artwork? Am I saying that Damien Hirst can only steal art from other artists and exploit their creativity for his own personal gains? No, absolutely not. And if you have opinions about this whole thing, put it in the comments. I personally believe that Damien Hirst can be extremely creative, extremely good, and makes oftentimes original, amazing art. I remember the first time I saw 100 Years, made in 1990. I was absolutely blown away. The cow head, the flies, the cycle of life. Beautiful piece of art. And so what is this video about? Well, this video is about how Damien Hirst changed the perception around particular artworks to completely blow them up. Now, before we explain how Damien Hirst controls the perception around his art and then pushes it up to insane heights, let's first take a look at these examples and draw some conclusions from them. If we look at Thomas Downing's work, we can see that he was original, that he was the first, that he was unique, that he was breaking a status quo and developing something, a unique art style that was not done before him, or at least not that I know of. Yet, Damien Hirst is running away with all the profits. And so what can we conclude from this? Well, art styles probably don't matter as much as we want to believe. I see artists struggling to find their art styles all of the time, worried about the fact that they don't have an art style yet, and that might be the reason that they are not succeeding, that they don't get the views, that they don't get the likes, that they don't get the comments, when in reality, what we can see here is that art styles are overrated. Originality is overrated. Being the first, being unique is simply overrated. Now, does this mean that we don't have to be original, don't have to be unique, don't have to develop our own art style? No, of course not. It's going to help, it's going to be beneficial, but it cannot be our sole purpose. We have to do something else, because art styles or uniqueness will not result in money. The second conclusion is that bad marketing is good marketing and good marketing is good marketing. There are even people who say that plagiarizing or copy-pasting elements from other artists is actually a marketing strategy in and of itself, because writers, critics will see this as an opportunity to write about that particular artist, that famous artist that is plagiarizing other artists, resulting in a lot of views, a lot of readers that can then be used to put advertisements on their blogs and then get more money, and the whole thing is going. And because it is so predictable that critics will do that, you could potentially abuse that. It's just like Andy Warhol said, don't pay attention to what they write about you, just measure it in inches. Now, I personally don't know if this is a strategy that is actually good and if this is something that is used by top level artists, but it certainly is an interesting concept to think about. So let's go back to the main question. Why is it that Damien Hirst dot paintings are selling for millions while Thomas Downing, in comparison to Damien Hirst, is selling for peanuts, or at least way less? I mean, still a lot of money, but you get the point. Well, the difference between Damien Hirst and Thomas Downing is, of course, marketing. Damien figured out how to get eyeballs towards his work, how to change perception, how to elevate his work through manipulating perception, while Thomas Downing didn't figure that out. Why is it that the gallery suddenly became interested in my art? Because the art was getting some traction. First, nobody cared about me, and then slowly but steadily, people started paying attention. That's the only difference. Seth Godin said the following: people do not buy goods and services. They buy relations, stories, and magic. And the way to get out relations, stories, and magic is to talk to people. And talking to people is what we call in business marketing. To illustrate this point even further, let's take a look at the most expensive painting, the most famous painting in the world, the Mona Lisa by Da Vinci. Why is it that this artwork is so famous? Is it because of the smile Da Vinci painted? Is it because something else that he painted, networking, whatever? No. It's because of one single story. If you look at the history of the Mona Lisa, painted 500 years ago, the first couple of 100 years, nobody really cared about the painting. Sure, it went through some famous hands, and eventually it was hung in the Louvre Museum, but it was not one of the top 50 paintings in that museum. Nobody went to the Louvre Museum to visit the Mona Lisa until in 1911, the painting got stolen. And journalists started writing about it, and the whole thing blew up. It became a mysterious painting with a mysterious story. Where is it? Who stole it? Everybody started creating conspiracy theories around it, and the media jumped on it with story after story after story. And so for decades on end, people were flocking to the Louvre Museum to watch the empty spot on the wall. The empty spot became more famous than the Mona Lisa ever was before that. And then the painting got found, it was hanging in the Louvre, and it was famous ever since. Now, what does this mean? Well, it means that if this painting would have not been stolen in 1911, we would not value the Mona Lisa the same way we do now. The Mona Lisa would not be the most famous painting in the world. And so the only reason that the Mona Lisa is what it is today is because of marketing, because of the story, because of eyeballs, attention that it got from 1911. And so what does this mean for artists? Well, it means that marketing is the number one skill. It's the skill that rules them all, the skill that makes all other skills obsolete, and the skill that amplifies everything else you do in your art career. It's the difference between Damien Hirst and Thomas Downing. In many ways, sales is just a form of bad marketing. Networking is just a form of bad marketing. Applying to galleries, which I was doing, as stated in the beginning of this video, is just a form of bad marketing. If you market properly, you don't have to apply anymore, because those galleries will contact you. And you could say, well, you could have improved your application skills or your pitch writing skills or email cold approach type of skills, but that would have probably resulted in more rejection. And I could have used all of the time to just build my marketing skills, to build my storytelling skills. And that is the choice that you make as an artist. And I believe that putting all of the time in marketing is probably the smarter thing to do. And so then the question becomes, how did Damien Hirst market his art and get the success that he got? And what can we learn from that? What can we apply ourselves to get, hopefully, somewhat similar results? The first thing we see is that Damien Hirst not just makes paintings, but a diverse range of artworks: paintings, sculptures, installations, large-scale public works, conceptual art, all of that stuff. And so what happens if you do that? Well, you will reach a broader audience, because some people love paintings and some people love sculptures. The second thing we see Hirst doing is that he expands his brand by going into different markets: retail, publishing, even developing his own restaurant with the whole pharmacy thing, and also collaborating with other brands in different markets, like Supreme Clothes, for example, or Tiffany & Co. And so what can we learn from this as artists? Well, a lot of times we are afraid to be sellout artists, to destroy our brand with things that are too economical in nature. But if we see these top level artists doing that, we can question whether or not that is just our own personal insecurity talking and not a valid strategy to follow. And so what I see a lot of artists doing is taking those Damien Hirst examples and calling him a sellout artist for that. And so if you are one of those artists, please give me your arguments in the comment section, because I truly don't understand why that would be a sellout artist. If you do that as an artist, you're still way more original than any other business in the world. Another thing we see Damien Hirst do is making artworks that are so controversial that they kind of market themselves. For example, 100 Years, the artwork that I showed earlier, where you have one cow head in one room where flies breed on the cow head, feed on the cow head, and then they go into the other room where there's a light attracting those flies and killing those flies, and you have this whole life cycle going on. Now, this is a very controversial work. It was so controversial that PETA, some animal rights organization, decided to challenge that, sue him for that, and take it way out of museums. And so what happens is that you have this whole story blowing up out of nowhere, where a lot of media institutions, a lot of journalists hop onto that and then start talking about that. And so again, bad marketing is good marketing here. Now, I personally don't understand why PETA would do something like this, because this is obviously challenging the whole animal rights thing in a positive daylight and bringing it to the awareness of the public. And so I don't see any problem with this. Apparently they don't have better things to do than challenging artworks in museums, but that's for another video. Now, a variation on this strategy of creating controversy is just doing something completely different, completely unique, very strange, in a way that it also gets that same amount of media attention. For example, what I did with Rising Universe, a painting series where I developed a method to paint with lightning up to 30,000 volts. This was such a strange method that journalists decided to write about this. For example, there's one article in Vice. The only reason they wrote about my work was because it was different, strange, unique, had that controversial element to it, because I was absolutely a nobody at that time. Still probably nobody, but you get the point. Another thing we see Damien Hirst do is destroying his own artworks. Now, this is very common in art history. A lot of artists have done this. For example, Michelangelo, who destroyed his preliminary sketches so that other people wouldn't see how much time and effort he put into his work. Very strange according to modern standards, but that's what he would do. Or Claude Monet, who would destroy a portion of his Water Lily series because he wasn't satisfied with the result. It wasn't up to his standard. Now, Damien Hirst does this in a completely different way. For the spot paintings, where he painted the spot paintings several every single day, because apparently it's not that hard to do that, what he would do is he would destroy a large portion of them, creating scarcity. But in addition to this, he would collaborate with journalists, and journalists would write about how he was destroying his artworks and creating that scarcity. And so he's combining scarcity tactics with media tactics in one series of artwork. So that's very interesting. And so what does this mean for artists? Well, we should probably ask ourselves before making the artwork if there is something that we could do in the creative creative process that would make this artwork more marketable, or that would make it interesting in some kind of way. And the simple act of asking yourself that question will open up new windows, new ideas, new ways to market your art. I've actually made a list for you with a series of questions that you can ask yourself prior to making the artwork to see if there are some marketing potentials that you would otherwise not tap into. I will share that list at the end of the video. Another thing we see Damien Hirst do is to sell with galleries, famous galleries like a Gaussian gallery, for example, but also bypassing the traditional system and selling directly to the public. For example, with his show in Sotheby's called Beautiful Inside My Head Forever. And in that show, he sold for a total of 111 million pounds. Now that's some serious money. And so what can we learn from that as artists? Well, apparently using galleries as a sales venue is not necessary anymore. You can in fact directly sell to the public. And so using galleries in a way that it's a mutual beneficial experience where they build up your brand a little bit and you give them a little bit of attention because you have a social media following, for example, that's great. But thinking that galleries are the only place to sell art, that's probably something from the past, and Damien Hirst shows that beautifully. Another thing we see him do is step into traditional media landscapes and make his own documentaries or mockumentaries. For example, Treasures from the Wreck of the Unbelievable, that's a whole mockumentary that he made himself. He also oftentimes pays people to make documentaries of him to elevate his status, to elevate his brand. Now, we can obviously not do that because that would cost too much money, but you get the idea. Using those traditional media platforms is probably something that at some point in your career you can start thinking about. And then the last thing we see him do is using social media platforms. Now, social media platforms are the cheapest form of marketing on this list, but they're also pretty hard, potentially even the hardest form of marketing on this list. But what's more is that this is the only marketing strategy on this list that is 100% fair. Social media is a game of skill. Whoever gets the highest CTR, the highest average view duration, and the highest average view per viewer will win the game. And so there are no gatekeepers on social media. That's why it's so amazing. That's why it's probably one of the best choices for beginner artists, because it's so cheap and because it's so democratic in nature. Now, as promised, here's the marketing questionnaire and the perception evaluation checklist that you can use to guide the perception of potential customers. Now, throughout this video, we talked about making art that is so controversial and so interesting that it does the marketing for you. This is extremely powerful and something that all top-level art has in common. I've dedicated 50% of a video to this called Drowning in Unsold Pieces, Selling Secrets Galleries Won't Tell You. Linked in the description and in the end screen. That said, get the hell out of here.